I'm talking to Patrick Stuart, who has currently got a Kickstarter running for Demon Bone Sarcophagus. Hi, Patrick.
Hello.
Hello. I should say as well, you're one of my favourite writers. Certainly in gaming. So I discovered your stuff about a year ago. I just started playing D&D again after a long time, and just wanted to play. Didn't want to DM or read any books, but I slowly fell down that hole and kept getting pointed to Deep Carbon Observatory by different recommendation things. If you like this, you'll also like this. And
Really? I didn't think it was on any like algorithms.
On Drive Through RPG, I think. So I started. A friend of mine pointed me at Melsonian Arts Council stuff, and I read through all the Undercroft magazines, and then I was like, what else can I get? And it kept saying in the little rolly thing underneath, DCO. So I read that, and it kind of just changed my ideas a lot about what you could do in a game and how you could write an adventure. So thanks for that.
I'm glad it had a positive effect. Did you get like the super expensive new version, or like the
well, I initially got the PDF of the original version with the maps that I could make no sense of whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I was quite glad when I've got the print version now of the new one with maps I can understand, which is good. But I mean, the writing and the artwork when I saw the original one just grabbed me so much. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad it has some kind of like well, I'm good. I'm surprised it's being recommended, but well, I suppose I should thank Daniel Sell, Melsonian Arts Council for that.
Yeah. So you were working on Demon Bone Sarcophagus again with Scrap Princess.
Yeah.
And you've got a Kickstarter which is due to end Friday.
4 days. It's on Saturday evening. It should
be Saturday evening, which is what, the 11th or something. So
yeah, and should be like midday in America. Yeah.
Okay. So if my 2 subscribers watch this on Sunday, then
yes,
it's a wasted effort. So tell us a bit about Demon Bone Sarcophagus then.
It's hold on. It's pretty much it's like a relatively simple dungeon crawl in 2 parts. There's one. The first part is basically like the beginning of No Country for Old Men, where you find a field of bodies. A bunch of conspirators have met up and murdered each other, and they've left behind scraps of clues and treasure. But unlike Old Country for Old Men, this happened on top of a ancient tomb, which during the struggle, huge holes opened up and people fell into the tomb and escaped into it or chased other people into it, and now they're running around down there. And so you go down into the tomb and encounter both the tomb, its guardians, and the survivors of this massacre, and all of them have various different interrelationships and different plots and schemes. And it's meant to be the first part in a trilogy of 3 adventures, or 3 books really, called Broken Fire Regime. So it has a lot of hook. It's mainly, originally as written in the first version, it was just one big hook. And then it expanded over time in different versions.
So how long have you been working on that for then?
On and off for like 6 years. I think the first pen to paper was like in 2015. And if you go back into my blog, I think there's interviews with people about fire, me doing research on fire. The whole thing was meant to be like fire themed. And then I went through many evolutions until we finished DCO last year, and having completed that, we thought we could probably do, because Broken Fire Regime had been through so many different publishers and so many different prospective people to do it, and it was such a big, crazy, impossibly huge project that it kind of broke everyone who was involved with it. And it was just like a weight on their minds. So we cut it into 3 different bits, 3 chunks of like adventure, each of which is meant to work on its own as a coherent adventure, but also work as like a sequence. And then we thought we'll do one of those a year as individual books, which makes them manageable so we don't go insane. And so hopefully by Saturday, once we've reincorporated, we'll be into production. And then hopefully when at the end of the year, this will be complete and we'll be 1/3 of the way through the saga. So fingers crossed.
Cool. So you do I mean, quite a lot of research goes into it from seeing some of the stuff on your blog. You do a lot of reading around the subject.
Less so for fire, because there's almost nothing you can find out about fire, at least as an element, because it doesn't have as big a, like, it doesn't leave as big as an impression in world cultures as an element as, say, earth, air, and water. Water has the sea and rivers, so it has like shitloads of gods and monsters and mythology. Earth obviously has everything put into veins of the earth. Fire, it's in real life, it's like a zone of exchange between two chemical states. And in terms of study, it's really hard to study until you get into like a scientific scientific culture. So a lot of what people said about fire is like there are fire gods, but they tend to be pretty similar, and it's hard to track down a lot of information about it. But yeah, I did read as much as I could about real life fire regimes, like in the American Northwest and other places. In most places, fire is a part of, plays some natural part of, or some pre-human part of the environment's like capacity to reset and regenerate, open new growth and stuff like that. So it's meant to happen, quote unquote meant, depending on how you think about environments in most places at most times, depending on how likely it is. There's like kind of a sequence, and then that can change a lot. So it changes a lot, especially in America and other like temperate colonial nations where people turned up and they had very rapidly like an industrial level of power and science, and they're like, this area is on fire most of the time, but we can stop that with science. And they could stop it with science and industry for like a generation or 2 generations. But after 3 or 4 generations of them trying to do it, we begin to realize they're kind of pushing uphill. And it's kind of, they've created a problem, which is that by stopping the fire regime from sequencing, they've built up such a store of fuels and dry, and by monopolizing water and various other things, they've created a situation where if they let go of this increasingly difficult method of control, then the fire they do get is going to be apocalyptic, and that's what California is going through right now.
Yeah. So when you say fire regime, you mean kind of like natural sort of fire cycle?
Yeah. And though in the game, in the adventure, there is a literal fire regime as you get deeper into the next books. Yeah. And there's also a natural fire cycle that's been disrupted, so that has a dual meaning.
Yeah. I remember I saw as part of the research that you read a book, which I think you're the only person I know who's ever read this apart from me, The Psychoanalysis of Fire.
Oh, Gaston Bachelard.
So I read that mainly just because I was interested in the title, and it turned out to be, so it's written like the 30s or
I don't remember when. No.
It's basically this guy looking back at what fire has been seen as through all different civilizations and sciences, and basically saying, that's stupid, I know better than you.
Yes, basically.
And then looking at him from another kind of 70 years on, you're just like, what the hell are you going at? You're just as much of an idiot as this lot back there.
Yeah, his only useful quality is that he put together so many interesting sources about fire. And if you cut him out of the book, it would be amazing. But it's just like this tiresome superior Frenchman, like, who, to be fair, has done a lot of research, but he's done it in the French way of just digging up so he can sneer at it. And that's why I don't have my copy of the Psychoanalysis of Fire anymore, because I found him too frustrating. I think
I really thinking I might get some interest, just knowledge out of it. But I think reading your blog post about it, doing it as a kind of research for your game, I think if I'd done that, at least I would have taken something out of it. But yeah,
there are a lot of really intensely weird ideas about fire in the early modern world. Like, does fire have a gender? Is fire like a tiny animal that we can't see? Stuff like that.
So wasn't it kind of like, is fire life, and reproduction, does that happen through fire?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like still a reasonable question if you want to go into the far reaches of science fiction, where it's like, what is alive anyway?
Yeah. But I think those are mostly the bits that Bachelard then kind of looked at and went,
yeah. These primitive thinkers, they think everything is about sex, whereas Gaston Bachelard, no, it is about psychoanalysis. Oh God.
I foolishly, I bought, because of the titles were so great, I bought 2 of his books at the same time. I think the other is something about the nature of shapes or something, which is actually still in print. It's a Penguin, I think, but I've not been able to bring myself to read that one.
You're the first person I've ever spoken to who's also read Gaston Bachelard, but who dislikes Gaston Bachelard as much as I do, because everyone else who recommends it thinks he's great. And then I have a disappointing moment where I tell him I think he's terrible, but I'm pleased that someone else dislikes him as much as I do.
So you're saying you've been working, well, on and off for 6 years on Broken Fire Regime. How, I mean, one of the things I really struggle with is just finishing stuff. And the idea of having a project running for that long is, I don't know, slightly scary. But how do you have a kind of approach to getting stuff out there?
What I do now, the reason that BFR took so long, has taken so long, is because it was too big, and for exactly that reason, there's always something you can do with it, and the size of the whole thing, even in its slimmed down form, was just so much that I get like hysterical paralysis, like where a project becomes so big, you've sunk so much into it that you can't let it go, but then you just kind of end up spinning your wheels because you have any individual thing to think about is just too big a problem. And so I end up flipping and going around in my head about it. And so when I say on and off, I mean, there were short bursts, relatively like a year or 2 years, where I was just hammering it and trying to work on it every day. Also periods where I would just have a meltdown and think, this isn't going to happen. And there was a period where I told Scrapper, I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. I feel like I'm going crazy. I was going to have to say, I'm not doing it. And then later on I resurrected it. And there was a bit like from like 2017 to like 19, I was shopping around trying to find someone who could publish it or help me publish it or publish it with me. And that did not work out at all. And then I think around 2020, I was like, okay, we'll do DCO and then we'll see if we can do this other thing as well. But yeah, don't do massive projects, especially on your own or with no money or no clear idea of when they end, because the weight of production and especially with a D&D game where it's not like a story where it's sequential, everything has to relate to everything else. And even if you try and do it well, you usually miss something out. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing massive projects like this unless you're part of a company where you can dump a lot of the work onto the system itself.
Yeah, I mean, didn't your earlier things, I seem to remember here you talk about, was it vein? I keep getting Deep Carbon Observatory and Veins of the Earth mixed up and coming out with deep vein thrombosis.
Also very bad, yes. But yeah, I was working on DCO and Veins around the same time, and Veins just came out later because, again, of its insane size and density, and the amount of work it took to get it to a publisher, getting them to agree, trying to get the process started, layouts, editing, everything, just the churn of it. And there's that triad of things. Business people say you can have something cheap, fast, and good, but you can only have two of those. Yeah, like you're not going to get all three. And with Veins, we didn't have any money up front, and we wanted it to be good, so we definitely were not going to be able to do it fast, and it was very slow. And again, I remember like, I won't go into like the dramas. There's lots of dramas in publishing of like emails and stuff going on, but yeah, it was a challenging situation, but we got it out.
And you're kind of effectively a publisher now of your own stuff, is that right?
Basically, yeah. I have a bunch of ISBN numbers and stuff, so yeah.
Yeah.
Although I'm not incorporated, but yes.
Yeah, I imagine that's a lot of overhead as well, sort of design, layout and stuff.
Yeah, well, luckily most of the design, at least for DCR, I could do it on my own, but then it's just a question of time. You're burning your own time. And Kickstarter, without Kickstarter, I couldn't do publish stuff because it takes so much of the financial terror away from it.
Yeah.
If there's no customer base, you don't have to do it. And if there is, then you're secure and you get the money ahead of time. But without Kickstarter, I couldn't be a publisher, I think. Scrap and we're not like in love with the idea of continuing with Kickstarter, so we're looking to see if we can ever get to a point where we have enough turnover where we don't need to do it. But I don't know when that might be or how that might come about. We'll have to see what happens in the coming years. And of course, if we get cancelled or just the whole market could collapse or anything else can happen at any time. So it's not like there's any real security.
I read, I think it was a blog post by Daniel Sell about kind of self-promotion and marketing, and in there he said something about Kickstarter. He wasn't quite dissing it, but he was saying it's just see it as another marketing platform. But
yes, basically. I mean, it's not entirely marketing. I do genuinely need the money because I don't have like 10 grand.
Yeah, getting the money up front is quite a big deal, surely.
Yeah, but if you're a business that like, if you have the money to print it, then most of what Kickstarter is just building hype and building FOMO. To be honest, most of what you're selling, if you're selling a non-vital product in today's world, is just selling like a chunk of identity or a bit of like culture or a sense of belonging more than you're selling the actual product. And that's what Kickstarter does, really. That's kind of one of the reasons Scrap and I don't like it. We have like a 20th century view of like business where it's like give you product, you give me money, and we're done. But that doesn't really exist anymore. It's like a much more fluid exchange of identity and like personhood or whatever. It's a strange business. But then I guess that's the bad part of it. The good part of it is I don't have to, probably one of the first, close to the first generation of people who can easily publish stuff on their own without having to appeal to a publisher. Like I'm my own gatekeeper, which is a very rare thing to happen. I think the only people I could think of who did it a lot in the previous life were like Dave Sim, who was a comics creator who went a bit mental. He self-published his comic and got quite wealthy off it, but that was in the 70s and 80s. I don't know how he did it, because he must have been an organizational fiend. And then the guys who invented Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles became self-publishers, but then that was just with the turtle money. They could do whatever they wanted, I think.
Yeah, I backed a thing on Kickstarter. It was a cookbook from a restaurant called, I can't remember, Alnir or something. But they originally were going to do that through a publisher, but they figured out that actually the publisher was getting them to pay all the upfront costs, and then they'd get a slice of everything that came in on top of that. They figured out they were better off doing it themselves, and actually ended up producing for sort of 30 odd quid a book, just probably the most incredible book I own. It would easily set you back 100 quid.
Really?
Just because they did it themselves and they could do that. Yeah.
I feel bad for publishers, to be honest, because I don't know what they're
I think their role is kind of marketing and admin, I guess, as much as anything, and maybe finding and promoting the talent or what sells, which might not be the same thing. I've got these really jumbled notes that I was going to write up, and that it just says writing an adventure, and then it's got like another line of like what do you call it when you do dit, like same as the line above, writing an adventure twice. I don't know what that means anyway. Am I right in thinking you did the text on Merc Borg as well?
I did a like editing pass on it. I didn't invent much of anything. There's a few fragments. Yeah, the first book I did is a bit of an edit. I don't know how many of my edits they accepted, but I definitely did something. Yeah.
I think you're credited with the English text or something like that. So
yeah, I mean, I did like I think I looked at every page and there were most sentences I did something on, but I don't want to try and claim or steal thunder from Merc Borg, because I don't know. Yeah. If I had a positive effect on the text, then I'm pleased. Maybe they just wanted me to do it to get my name on it, or at that time I was a DR, I don't know. But they're still doing really well, I think, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they're doing amazing. Yeah.
And what is it? Mark Dias-Truman just is doing the Avatar RPG, and he's just become, well, he was a multi-millionaire, but his company made like
this Kickstarter just went crazy.
Yeah. I don't know what he's going to do now. That's too much power for a small publisher to have. I'm sure someone's going to flip out about something at some point, because he'll be walking around laden under all that money and not know what to do with it. And there's no safe way to spend it in the RPG industry. Maybe he'll just have to go to Mexico and just like lie on a beach somewhere.
Just launder it out of the RPG industry.
Right.
I spoke to you a little bit ago about possibility of re-releasing your earlier stuff. I think a lot of that's still under contract to.
Like some of it, like even like selling people the same thing again. Like we saw people DCO twice, but we kind of felt okay because the old one definitely had a lot of flaws, and the new one had a lot of improvements. And gradually, I've only got like 2 things that I can think of that are under contract. One is Silent Titans, the other one is Veins of the Earth. Veins, the rights come back to us sometime this year or next year, and sometime after that we'll try and do our own version of it, but that will take a huge amount. Again, we'll have to go deep into the text, try and create new stuff. relay out everything and try and get that right, and then we'll maybe try and Kickstarter or do something, and then we'll add that to the Foster Parcels like store, so it'll sit alongside everything else, hopefully. With Silent Titans, I don't know what's going to happen with it. It depends a lot on the publisher, and it's like a three-way ownership between me, Dirk, and Christian, so that's very much up in the air. What else? There's many sort of Blue Medusa, but I don't take money on that anymore, so I consider it not irrelevant.
You really need to have so that's I was going to say something there. Finishing projects. Do you get to play much?
I'm only in that game with you and David, really, which is fine by me. Like, playing once a week is nice, and it's like a nice break. But I don't get to play that much. I mean, I haven't really gone out of the house much in the last year and a bit, although I don't think anyone has. And internet Zoom meetings and calls like that are kind of like, depending on how they go, they're a roughly equal exchange of energy, because it's nice to meet people and talk to them, but also it soaks up a lot of like attention. It's like a lot of mental effort to try and focus on it. I usually paint when I'm playing as well.
Yeah.
So, which actually helps me really concentrate on what I'm doing in the game, because there's a lot of like dead space, and in the Zoom call, you're like, there's no naturally intuitive thing to do with your brain or your like mind while everyone else is thinking or acting.
Yeah, I've really struggled with that, because I mean, like I say, I came back to gaming after like 30 odd years during the pandemic. So I've only played online, and it's I think that painting is a good thing to do. It's really hard it's a real struggle not to kind of go off and sort of check Twitter or make a cup of tea or something in between moves. You have to stay quite focused. And I'm not, so like you said, we're playing in a weekly game together with Dave McGrogan running it. And I often I'm amazed by how much you and the other players, Edmund and Theo, seem to remember about the various NPCs we've got and the relationships between them.
I feel like I don't remember most of them. There have been so many.
You remember their names?
We've tried to keep a sheet of like the people we directly employ, right? And I've tried to write down the graves whenever our numerous servants die, but there's still a lot. And I feel like we ran into someone, like I know Theo's character is someone that almost all of us have had multiple characters die during the sequence, so we could run into someone that our previous character knows, but our current character wouldn't know, which is convenient because I've probably forgotten them by now. So I don't think I remember Theo's character, who used to be an NPC and is now a PC. I don't think I remember him very well, and though I know he spent time with the group previously.
Yeah, it's been very death heavy, and that's it's kind of interesting, because I've not really played since I started playing again. It's mainly been 5e, which is, as far as I can work out, people don't ever die in that.
Yeah, you can play 5e in an OSR style, but it's like you have to strip out a lot. I've played 5e with David, and you end up nearly dying about as much as we nearly die in maybe slightly less, because he just keeps the same game logic. But yeah, the culture of play around 5e is like, I imagine, very, very different, although I'm not like deep into it myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it varies a lot with who's running it as well. So the two different game masters I play with are both very different style. True. But in fact, actually, the first game we had quite a few deaths, but it does seem to be quite hard for that to happen. I mean, do you play other stuff?
No, not really. I try to keep up with stuff that's going on in the RPG sphere by picking up the books and reading them. Yeah. But not really. I'm kind of happy being in one game a week. There was a period when I was like really deep into really like an enthusiast, and I was like buying lots of story games and buying other games, and I was going down to a local club to play them with whoever was there, like pretty much every week. And I was kind of like, I was walking there as well, like 45 minutes each way. But that was like 8 years ago, and I've just got old. So I don't do that anywhere nearly as much, and I'm relatively happy. I like making stuff and creating stuff, and it's hard to, well, it would be impossible for me to run a game because I wouldn't have the energy. I could maybe play in another game per week, if it was local, or if I could get there easily, I could probably do it. But that would be the max for me, I think.
Yeah. What sort of story games were you playing?
I ran Apocalypse World. There's a game called Ghost Echo by a guy who also did a bunch of other like one-page games. What else have I done? We played like a game called Microscope, which isn't really, I don't know if it's a story game, but it's like a world building, like Exquisite Corpse game where you break up the game, the creation of a reality, and then you build a reality. What else did we play? I think we played a lot of relatively short. We played like a samurai game. I forget what it's called, but it's the one where it's like a story game and the samurai can instantly kill any lower status character. I'm thinking maybe, and I forget if you can also be killed by them. So it's mainly about living up to your code of honor, etc. There's a few, but there was a period where I was meeting up with David and other people in Liverpool like every week, and just, Mouse Guard I tried to run, but I couldn't understand it. I don't get the burning wheel system, even in reduced form. The logic of it, there's something there that I have trouble processing.
I've just gone down a big hole in the last couple of months on sort of story games and stuff on itch.io. Ran my first game of Lasers and Feelings a couple of weeks ago, which was really fun. It's very interesting how that kind of minimal rule set makes for such a different play style. Well, not so much the rule set, but the fact that you're generating a random adventure without really knowing anything up front about it. So as the GM, you're just improvising all the time. And it made me actually kind of steer the thing, into a sort of Star Trek TV episode format almost. Whatever the players did, not that I was railroading them, but that I was like, how can I take this towards a conclusion that's kind of satisfactory for all? And actually, the hardest thing about it I found was playing combat. Because
story games are difficult with very hard, especially if you come to them with OSR experience, because the mindset's so different. Like story games really pop well with like you said, improvisation, interpersonal relationships, characters, and a kind of a slightly soap opera feel where it's all about like your story and your relationships and your friends and stuff like that, and you get like scenes. But I tend to be quite bad at things that like OSR stuff is good at, which is like hard puzzles, relatively hard combats, like strongly challenge-oriented play, and big systemic problems, like where you genuinely have to but it's an actual real problem where you have to kind of gradually work it out by like going around the game world or carefully writing stuff down or thinking about it. At least in my experience, they seem to be relatively slightly different spheres of play, although also I think no one really has a clear idea about what exactly defines what a story game is, and like everyone has it's like pornography. We all know it when we see it, but when you get down to the like, how do you define this? None of us really know. Which is like, it seems like a story. It's in that zone.
Something that I was thinking about recently. You made a lot of monsters, which is kind of I find a lot of monsters in gaming kind of unsatisfying. Either they're something you're kind of familiar with the real world, or they're kind of a blend of that. Like, I mean, the good thing in David's game is we get the sort of shrew men and the earwig men and the crow men, and you've kind of got a reference point, and then you get your kind of Umber Hulks and Ropers and just weird D&D style abominations. But to come up with genuinely new monsters which kind of have a real pull and a real sort of feel to it. It's not just like, here's a block of stats, this one's got armor class such and such and this many hit points. I see a lot of people coming out with monsters, but not many who kind of make them interesting and really feel like they ought to have a place in the world.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Scrap and I together have produced like an ungodly range. We've produced a lot of monsters over the years. Hundreds, I think. Like 50 at least for Veins, and then 100 for Fire in the Velvet Horizon, and then however many others. So I'm pretty sure they weren't all bangers, and they've produced like a load of monsters. You're going to get like some quality and some chaff, but I guess I could write a whole. I can't really talk about design because I tend to do almost everything intuitively or procedurally, or by iteration, and just kind of work out what things are meant to be by applying my mind to them over time. I could probably try and write stuff about monsters. I think I had a blog post where I looked into like the top 10 most emblematic D&D monsters as voted for by my like readers.
Yeah.
And they were all, it was a strange mingling of very simple classical ones like skeleton, orcs, goblin, and very particularly odd ones like the gelatinous cube was like one of the top 5. And then why a cube? Because we know how Gary worked as monsters out, which is that he basically got a bunch of weird toys and then said, okay, this is a monster, it works like this, and he used his like D&D playing experience or running experience to work out what would be an interesting challenge, and then he invented a shitload of stuff and the good ones stuck. So again, there was an iteration, so it's hard to look at what will be good ahead of time and what, like with anything with OSR or with like hipster OSR, there's like a weird tension between utility and invention. If you invent a lot of weird stuff, but then it doesn't feel like you can use it easily or players can understand it or interact with it, or you can go too far the other way and make stuff that everyone easily understands, but it doesn't feel interesting, and you're trying to find some potent or interesting exchange between those two poles. You know what it is, you get a feeling for it, you can explain it to a player, but also it feels like it has depth and weight, and it calls upon like the nometic tradition of human culture to some extent.
Yeah. So I was a bit thrown by then. Just then, the first car of the hour drove past.
How many cars do you get an hour?
I should explain that I'm interviewing Patrick from my car because this is the only place I can get internet. We get about a couple of cars an hour down here. I should give you a recce. I was listening to a DCO playthrough on the Gauntlet podcast a few weeks ago, which made me think that I want to run. I kind of had thought it's great to read, but I'd really struggle to run it. But having seen how they handled, particularly the kind of grid of things going on at the same time. And I noticed you've got a thing on your website like, oh, this isn't just pretentious art shit, you can play it, of lists of run-throughs. Do you
Yes.
you kind of watch or listen to stuff like that? If someone's playing your adventure, would you?
I feel weird. I should, but I don't. I feel weird listening to it. I don't even read a lot of the reviews of my stuff because I have incoherent emotional reactions that I can't really understand.
Right, yeah.
But I do think it is like, I know there's a lot of information in a lot of our stuff, but it is all meant to be playable. And even though there's a lot of information in total, in the adventures at least, it's all meant to happen in sequence and for the interrelationships, hopefully, to be encoded in that event. So it shouldn't be like, ideally, it should be playable, even though there's a lot of stuff going on. It is meant to be played, even though it is quite pretentious. So yeah. I'm always happy to hear about people actually playing it.
Do you check out any other kind of role-playing podcasts, or?
You know, I used to listen to quite a few. I listened to like that one that Ken, what's his face, had with his friend, the one that always wins at the Ennies.
I'm not sure. I'm that new to.
Okay, well, there's a podcast with a guy
Ken and his friend.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a guy called Ken who worked on the new Vampire the Masquerade, and he did a book called The Dracula Dossier. I've forgotten his second name, but he does a podcast with his friend. And if he goes to the NAs, they always win the best podcast award. And but I don't listen to it anymore. And the only one I still listen to now is Fear of a Black Dragon with Jason Cordova and Tom something, I think is his co-presenter. I listen to that sometimes.
Yeah. There's a fairly new British one called Gelatinous Cube, which is quite fun.
Is it like an actual play podcast? What do they do in it?
No. What they do, it's a brother and a sister, and they take it in turns to come up with an adventure hook. So each episode is just a discussion of that adventure hook and different ways you can make it. And they both throw their ideas, and then the Gelatinous Cube comes up with an alternate take at the end. That's cool. You were talking about kind of being triggered by stuff like that. I noticed you talk quite a bit about mental health in interviews and stuff like that. Not necessarily your own. I mean, partly your own, but also just of the general gaming community. I just find it quite interesting and relevant what you've got to say on that.
Well, that everyone's kind of slightly bonkers. It's a bunch of like mildly autistic or like what's the new phrase? I forget.
Oh, yeah.
It's an American phrase, but yeah, it's everyone's like a neurodivergence. But that's like RPGs, as far as I can tell. It's always kind of been.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't think I've ever met an interesting person who's not sort of.
That's slightly cruel, but we'll see. But yeah, like that's the reason RPGs kind of still exist as a creative space. It's because anything that doesn't have like a bunch of genuinely weird people in it, if it's useful, it always ends up being co-opted by beautiful, socially competent people who make a lot of money out of it, and then once they're done, they just forget about it. But RPGs has such a deep appeal to that particular mindset, or to that kind of island of misfit toys, that you can't monetize it fully, and you can't corporatize it fully, and you can't kind of make it fit neatly into society, even though I think a few of its members would like it to. So it will always be an island where very strange people can go who have particular obsessions. And obviously, if you're someone who has difficulty with society but still likes to spend time around other people, but likes to spend time around other people specifically solving problems, then you've got RPGs. There's not many other places you can do that.
Switching tack slightly, who or what changed your life? So to explain that a bit, when I think back, I think there's about like half a dozen major points in my life where a book or a person or some other piece of art or something has kind of left me quite a different person.
What changed my life was probably having like a drug addiction or drug use in college, which meant that I basically blew my degree, but also didn't blow it so hard that I could resit it. So I ended up with a third, which is essentially useless, which cut me out of like the post-university job market, which meant that I spent like 10 years working as a data entry guy and being very depressed in Liverpool before I started blogging. And if I hadn't done that, if I'd done very well at my degree, if I'd got a first or even better, I might have gone into a completely different line of work. I might have been what I was probably meant to be, or was designed to be by nature to be, which is like some kind of academic or low-level government operative or like bureaucrat or something. And who knows? But I've kind of, in school, before A-levels, they were very impressed with me at various points. I had points where I was considered almost gifted, but then as soon as I was moved to a different set or an improved class, I would often fail. So in school, in A-levels, I was both moved into the top set in maths and also given remedial English lessons that you would give to people who were kind of slightly developmentally subnormal. So school couldn't make any sense out of me, really. It was like, is this kid gifted? Is he like mentally challenged? It seems like both. And I kind of had the same problem at university where it was like I did really well and then also failed a lot. And now I'm doing this, which is like a kind of an inexplicable career where I can't even describe how I do it really, or how I ended up doing it. It's such a weird mishmash of different influences and questionable choices. That would be the main. So yeah, my A-levels and my failure at university are probably like the main things. If you mean like in a nice way,
yeah.
yes, like you know what, I really liked Babylon 5 as a kid. That was just something that I actually insisted on avoiding a once-in-a-decade family reunion just because the last episode of Babylon 5 was on. And I was just ignoring everyone and watching that crouched by the TV because they were making too much noise. And I love the fact that I was like 12 or something, but J. Michael Straczynski did like an actual time travel loop, which he'd planned ahead for. He did like an episode in the first season where someone turns up from the future. And then he went to the third season and did the episode where someone goes back. And that blew my mind. I was like, this is the best writing that anyone has ever written. I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Is that where your interest in time came from, do you think?
Maybe it was already there. I don't know. But I'm still slightly impressed by that. And then it kind of went off the boil after season 3. But yeah, there was a lot of TV that I watched when I was like 9 to 15, which I suspect had a big effect on me. There's that. There's Jimmy McGovern, he did a series called Cracker, which was kind of like edgy as fuck for when in like the 90s. And that blew my mind. So I remember Christopher Eccleston in his first like big acting role where he plays like I think he's like an autistic schizophrenic or autistic like Shannon or something who goes crazy. But that kind of also blew my mind when I somehow managed to see it, even though I probably shouldn't have been allowed to. Yeah, what else? Reading.
You read it? I follow your reviews on Goodreads, and you seem a very prolific reader.
I'm not reading as much as I used to because I don't seem to have the time anymore, and it's hard. My reading is really slacked off. There's a period in like 10 years ago where I was just like bombing through a book a week, and now it takes me ages to finish anything. So my ability and like willpower to finish reading stuff has like been badly hurt. But I tried to. I was always an obsessive and a very early reader in school, like in primary school. Again, they put me in like the top. They graduated me out of whatever you need to be taught reading and writing. And they said, "Oh, you're now an expert, Patrick. You can read whatever you want." And so I went to the library and just started reading basically everything they had, up and down like the scale, because I didn't really know what was appropriate for me to be reading. So I was good at it to begin with, and then just kept doing it.
Then you ended up in remedial English?
For spelling and handwriting. My handwriting's so bad I have to print.
Yeah.
And even then, my printing, it can be bad unless I'm focusing carefully on it. And my spelling wasn't great, and still it still hasn't improved a great deal. So I think that they were just going through like the list of things to do, and one of the list of things to do was like boot him out of the class and put him in like, they had this thing called phonics, which just died a death, I think, and disappeared. But I was in the phonics class. When I was in the phonics class with a bunch of kids who definitely had trouble reading. That was basically because of their IQ, because they had various levels of like of mental difficulty. And yeah, no coherent bureaucratic system has been able to make sense out of whatever my brain does. And depending on who I was dealing with or what I was doing, I've swung madly between this is a gifted child from whom we expect a great deal to what the fuck is wrong with him? Why is he failing so badly? Neurodivergent to the max, I guess. So now I guess the internet in a sense saved me, because it's one of the places where you can basically create your own boundaries for success. You can just basically define what you're good at and invent a job that only you can do and then do it. And then it's like, oh, I'm good at this thing, whatever it is. I'm really good at writing and publishing role-playing game supplements for old school D&D, which almost no one plays.
Yeah, I mean, within that kind of micro segment, you seem to you're one of the stars, I guess.
A strange star. I don't really want to be a star. I just want to make enough money that I don't have to go back to the call center, and where I can afford rent, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Stars fall, as we've seen in the OSR many times.
Yeah, something struck me, which you said in another interview I heard about. Oh, I think my car battery's just exploded or something. Hang on a moment.
Oh no.
No, it's the inverter. You don't get this for regular Zoom interviews.
Is your car okay? Do you want to carry on?
Bit of smoke in the back. So to explain, my laptop, this laptop I'm using has a crap battery, so I've brought an inverter in the car.
Right.
Power it off. I've got another battery back there, and something's up with the inverter. Anyway, I'll sort that out.
Okay, so there's no danger. As long as there's no danger, okay.
Well, it's disconnected now. So that big audience you've got, I guess a lot of that is probably because you were blogging at a certain time when that was popular, and then the whole kind of Google Plus thing.
I think at any point there are like different social networks rising and falling, and if you get and different like cultures being born and dying, and if you get into the right one at the right time, then you can ride the wave past a certain point, and then maybe at some point you crash back down. But I've basically peaked. My blog hasn't really had any massive like growth in readership. Whoever's dropping out, they seem to be getting replaced. It just keeps bobbing along at the same level. And I don't think there's been a massive change in the Kickstarter since last year. Hopefully we'll hit the same thing DCO did, but again, it looks like it's about the same. So fair enough.
But if someone were wanting to do that nowadays, not saying I'm asking for myself, but I'm asking for myself, how would you, is there a way to kind of build a, sort of build up a following like that? I guess you do blog very regularly, which probably helps.
Take what you're good at and what you like doing and look around the social network and see if there's a way that you can turn that into something to regular content that you actually like producing and that people will read. If you produce anything, almost anything on a very regular basis and it isn't shit, you'll slowly or quickly build up some kind of following. It might top out at a certain level or it might like degrade eventually. But if you just produce anything that isn't terrible and just keep putting it out in public, something will happen at some point, although you might not be successful enough to move to being your own boss.
Yeah.
Although where to do that and how to do it, I have no idea. I just did what everyone else was doing, which was to get a blog from Blogger, which everyone else had. And then I went on G+, which everyone else was on. And I've just kept going. And I've basically done what James Raggi does, which is like call a printer and ask them how printing works and look it up and say, can you print this and deliver it? And as well that I've learned in design and stuff and just basically built in bits and pieces of knowledge around the borders of what I knew. But it all just grew from me liking rambling, inventing stuff and putting it online and being happy for people to read it, which I still kind of do, nowhere near as much as I used to, because now it's a business and I have to have projects that I have to complete, so on.
But you do, I mean, you write a hell of a lot, and some of your posts are really long. You post
some of them, yeah.
You post a lot of long reviews on Goodreads as well. I'm not sure, do they all go on your blog or some of them?
I think there are some on Goodreads that aren't on the blog, I think. But nowadays, most of them will be cross-posted. And the handful of very long reviews, you can't see the whole thing on Goodreads because it has like a maximum value, a maximum word limit. I made a promise to myself, like back in 2017, I would try to review or write something about every book that I read, because I was looking back on my own memory of reading and writing, and all I knew is that there were books that I definitely had read, but I had no strong opinion about them. I didn't really remember much about the details of them. And I thought, that's kind of destroying the purpose of me reading them. So I should try and write something, both so I have a record of what I've done, but also to try and condense the memory of it in my head. But now I haven't managed to keep it up. I've managed to give them a star rating for everything, but unless there's something I haven't been able to write in-depth reviews of everything I read, because it's devoting an hour to genuinely thinking about a book, especially if it didn't read a very strong, if you have like a vague positive impression, but nothing special, it's hard to write a positive review of a book that isn't like super exceptional. It takes much more cognitive energy for me, especially to write about good things and about bad things, because I think a work of art, if it's good, it's almost represented by its wholeness and its completeness, and because every single part of it works fluidly, like the body of an animal running. And when you see that, the mind doesn't naturally turn to, how do I take this apart? Because it's the pleasure of the whole working as it should. Whereas if you read something bad and you don't like it, if it makes you angry, then your mind naturally is already upset. So you're already in a critical, analytical mood, and you don't need to worry about how to take it apart, because it's disjunction. The fact that it doesn't work presents itself to you as a series of parts, which makes analysis easier. So to analyze what is beautiful is a lot harder than to analyze what is good, because you have to kind of take the knife to a living being, and it's not like a pleasurable experience. Though it can be if you think on it for a long time and you kind of begin to work out. Some works of culture have like depth that you can appreciate more if you think about them a lot. Like John Peterson's book Playing at the World had a lot of interesting stuff in it, but it was hard to condense or combine into a coherent whole. But once I did, it had like an element of beauty with the moral arc of the whole work that would have been hard to spot in any individual part.
Yeah, I started off a while ago with a similar intention of, I mean, there's a lot of books which I've read a few chapters of and realized, oh, I've read this before. So again, I wanted to kind of get those memories down, but it's really hard, especially with good books, like you say. I just end up right, oh, this was brilliant, really good.
Yeah, it was really good,
fantastic. But I do appreciate the lengths that you go to on some of those reviews. They're not short. Kind of it's the end of my questions.
And your car's no longer on fire. A win for both of us.
Yeah. Oh. Do you want a quick tour of the area?
Sure, yeah, go on.
This is where the smoke's coming out. I live down there somewhere in the dip.
Oh my god, that reminds me of home. Reminds me of Cumbria a lot.
Oh right, well we're just on the border of Cumbria.
Yeah.
Yeah, just south of Hexham.
Is that dry stone walling?
Oh, lots of dry stone walling. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of glaciation.
Yeah.
Lots of pine trees.
I was just going to say that'll make our American viewers jealous because they haven't got dry stone walling, but then have they? Maybe they have.
I think they do in Nevada and places.
I saw an amazing YouTube video about this guy who was telling the history of a wood by walking through it and just seeing things that would be completely invisible. And a lot of it was kind of, oh, these indicate there was a wall here and it's fallen down this way, and that's because there were cattle on that side and sheep on this side and 200 years ago. So yeah.
Well, a lot of the pine trees in Cumbria are there because of World War One. They're
Right.
meant to be fast growing, so they're made to be props for the mining efforts. And a lot of the forests are still there because they were like, the war ended, but rooting up the trees, I think, would have been a chore. So now they've got a pine forest.
Yeah, that's all we've got. I could do with a few more trees around here. There's some, if you go towards Cumbria, there's more actually. Well, thanks for talking, Patrick.
Thank you, Dan.
And I'll see you for our regular game of D&D in a couple of days.
Oh yes, well yeah, Thursday I think.
Thursday this week, yeah. And good luck with the Kickstarter, Demon.
Thank you. I hope it does well. And enjoy the day because I've been out myself and it was super hot.
It is very hot. I was fortunately the shades come over now. I was getting a bit hot in the car without setting fire to it even.
Okay, goodbye.
All right, bye.